Now, today's question is, what kind of hardware to use for theater playback for sound? I'm going to divide this into three different sections. One is the software, and then the computer, and then the hardware that you may or may not want afterward. So starting with the software, these days there's basically only one choice, and that is QLab. That's pretty much your choice. It used to be free. It's not really free anymore, but it's like $3 a day to license, so it may as well be free. And it's of the things that you need to get to do playback in theater, it is the cheapest thing. So, just give them some money. I think that I may have been the first person to use QLab off Broadway. I believe that might be the case. It's changed quite a bit since then. It's actually become vastly more sophisticated a program than it used to be. They even have a version for the iPad, and there's ways that you can. It's not as sophisticated, but it's a big go button. I haven't tried it though, so I don't really know. There are other programs. I've looked around. I don't know. I don't know anything about these other programs. Back in the olden days, I'd use something called SFX because that was really the only program available. That's a PC-based program. It still exists. It was a kind of a hassle. It was not the most intuitive program back in the day. I have not used it in 7 years, maybe. When did the Chronicles of Riddick come out? But getting back to QLab, if you're going to use Figure 43's QLab, then you're going to be on a Mac. So then the question is, how are you going to deal with being on a Mac? You can go three different ways, basically. The Mac Mini, the new Mac Mini, is really quite a nice computer. It's very powerful, it's very small, and it's very quiet. Now, it's a desktop computer, so it doesn't have battery power, and you'd have to lug around a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse with it. But it's very nice. And in my shop, I actually have two of them, and have destroyed two of them over time. Yep. Two of them I blew up. They're really quite nice, and they're very reasonably priced. Now, the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and get a Mac laptop. They're expensive, but they have battery power, and they're completely self-contained. And if the power goes out in the theater, which, if you're doing like a show where you're like rolling in quickly one day and you're doing work, the likelihood that you've accidentally plugged into the wrong outlet is pretty good. And if you have done that, then unplugging with a computer that doesn't have its own battery power to last until you plug it back in again can be a bit of a pain in the tuchus. So it's worth thinking about. But regular Mac laptops they're pricey, but maybe you like that. Maybe you like the Mac laptop. There's another option that has existed. Here's a computer that I set up out of an old Dell. It's one of the little notebook computers. It's got a smaller keyboard, and it'll easily fit inside a purse. It totally works though. It did take 3 days to get the Mac operating system to work on this little Dell. And now this kind of thing changes so often, I'm not even going to go into details about it. So I did that a few years ago. So it works, but it's just it's kind of finicky. It's finicky to put together. It is not necessarily finicky to use once you've got it up and going. So those are your three major options. Get a Apple desktop computer, and I would strongly recommend the Mini just because of the price performance ratio on it, because you can almost always find a keyboard and a monitor and a mouse. And if that doesn't do it for you, then get a Mac laptop. And if you want to go crazy, go around, try to figure out what kind of computer you can build, making sort of a Hackintosh, as it were. Now, the other thing to look out for on the Mac operating system side is whatever you do, do not change your operating system. Do not let Apple upgrade it, because Apple is the king of making all of your hardware just not work anymore when you upgrade their operating system. So just don't do it. When you get a computer that's working with QLab, I would really try to not do anything else with it. If you're going to go on the PC side and try SFX, PCs are cheaper, a little bit easier to deal with. Now, there's two more issues. One is Apple hates CD drives now. And if you're doing a show where there's 12 one-person shows, I would strongly encourage you to tell your artists to give you their music as MP3s, or better yet, .wav files on a thumb drive or something. If you have to, it's kind of difficult to buy stuff on iTunes and then download it and get it to work. You might try Amazon, might be a little bit better if you have to do that. Because there's always that one cue where they're like, oh, and then I play this song and I dance to it. And, I mean, it's a terrible idea, but they maybe do a funny dance and that might be worth it to you. So you're going to want to have, maybe you're going to want to have an external DVD player. Advantage, or CD recorder player. The advantage are these things are cheap now. So, I mean, I got this one for $35. It's no big deal. Now, the last question is, how are you outputting from your computer? Are you coming out the headphone jack and then going into some kind of mishmash of Franken cable to get into the mixing board? Yeah, coming out of the headphone jack on most Macs isn't really the most elegant solution. When you've patched in and out of that headphone jack an adequate number of times, it's not going to be that happy. After a couple months of patching it constantly, it's going to start to get a little bit squonky and be less excited. And you'd think the same thing would be true of USB ports, but that's not been my experience. So the cheap, dirty, two-channel way to deal with this is to get one of these old iMac, Griffin iMic things. They come in a variety of... Wait, this is not one. This is just a hub. Pay no attention to me. Little iMic. It's got a couple of outputs. It even ostensibly has an input. I used this one for timecode when I was using it. It's probably more reliable than the actual headphone output. This is actually a trick that I learned from an electrician, so I will have to... Kia Rogers told me about that. So I have to give it up to an electrician now. But if you want to do more than 2 channels of output, your options start to get a little more hanky. Right now, my favorite are Focusrite, just because their price is reasonable and they're not too... They have not been too much trouble as far as loading drivers has been concerned. A lot of people really like the RME Ian Denio said that a lot of people who are using the RMEs in theater, they're certainly using them in music. They're very overpriced. These days, the difference in quality between different A to D converters and D to A converters is really not very high. There's a lot of debate about that, but the people who are debating that are wrong. Now, if you're only doing 2 channels, a little iMic kind of thing might be fine. And the fact is, you can use the headphone output on the Mac as much as you like until it finally wears down and starts to yell at you. Any questions?